For questions then. Very, very, thank you, Michael. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My first question is, you said their ethnicity, they are from Saudi Arabia, the Bedouins. So how come they were not settled in Saudi Arabia, which has incredible wealth? That was one.
The Bedouins preceded Saudi Arabia by hundreds of years.
Sorry, the question was if the Bedouins originated from Saudi Arabia, why didn't they settle in Saudi Arabia? That whole region, people were moving through for hundreds of years, and the nomadic way of life, remember, Abraham was from Mesopotamia, right? And he was a Bedouin, basically, who roamed from Mesopotamia all the way till he ended there. So there are many groups like that. This whole area in the Middle East, this area that we are talking about, saw movements of people. Every civilization from the start of time has moved through that area in one time or another, and that group did too, and ended up in that broader area of the Sinai Peninsula, what is now the Israeli Negev and Jordan. These are basically, if you look at the structure thing, most of the Bedouins in Jordan, the Negev and Sinai are from the same, they are groups that come from the same tribes. And they were separated by the advent of international borders, which were never there before. Yeah, go ahead.
Could you tell us how many people will live on this property?
Yeah.
And what the patterns of their housing will be, what types of shelters, how they're segregated from the visitor center?
Okay.
How does it all work?
The question is the number of people and how the housing will be organized and so forth. This project is going to be, the people will not live there on that site. One of the things that we wanted is to make sure that people for that project come from different villages and different tribes in order to break that separation that exists within the Bedouin society. You see, the tribal aspect there is one of the weaknesses that keep that societies backward, because the tribes tend to be at Longhorn all the time. They fight at all kind of things. So we said we don't want this project to be associated with one tribe. Nor do we want it to be associated with one town or one village. My counterpart on that project is the mayor of Hura, which you asked what it was. Hura is one of the local towns that I mentioned earlier, the smallest and perhaps the nicest of them all. So we said we want the group of people to come from all of those kind of things. We knew that housing will be a politically charged issue, so we decided let's not go into housing, but create an agricultural enterprise, and people will be a community around a concept, around a shared endeavor, rather than community by virtue of being neighbors who live next to each other. There will be no housing there. In the beginning, the project will probably take about 3 years now to reach its kind of break point, when it will be hopefully self-sustained by all the business type, or not, I don't like the term business, the productive activities there, the cheese making and the medicinal plants and so on. And when it will stabilize at that level, it will probably offer employment for about 70 individuals, which is a small number. So it's very important that we'll be able to increase it. The site is small. It will not be able to enlarge. So for a while we're thinking and this is where the cooperative as the social structure as well as an economic entity will come in handy, because what we're going to do, we're going to enlarge the membership in the cooperative. How? By getting into entering relationships with people in the outlying villages. Somebody who has a small herd of sheep or goats, which today throws away the wool and throws away the milk because they can't afford to bring it to market. They cannot afford to abide by all the sanitary condition that you need in order to sell milk or cheese. So these people will be able to teach them how to deal with the animal better. We'll be able to supply them with organic fodder. So now they'll have a value added that to what they're doing. They'll bring the milk, let's say, to the site. It will be processed into cheese or other dairy product in the dairy, and they'll have additional income. And they can work with the cooperative as suppliers who will be paid for their supply, or as members who will benefit from what everybody else will benefit with. So we hope that that cooperative structure will allow us to really reach, starting from that 70s, hundreds and maybe thousands of people in the future. Yeah, I think here there was a question. Yeah.
My question is simply about the land. Now, you talk of the Bedouin who has over the millions traveled here and there to live, to protect themselves, to nurture themselves, to live. Now, these lands that they have controlled and such for millenniums, what does it really belong to? Now, you say the Negev. The Negev's been there, oh gosh, ever since the Negev's been there. But who was to say who can traverse this land, who can traverse that part, who can put a city here, who can put a town here, who can put a well there? Who is it to say that this land has been free for so many years that people traverse environment? Who's to say whose it is?
Well, the question is ownership of land, and who has the right to say who it belongs to, and what about all the people that moved for all this millennium from place to place and so forth. Now, this is a very important question that goes right at the heart of modern capitalism, which is essentially recognized property values, property ownership as a very central value. Most Aboriginal people, it's true for American natives as well, didn't have a concept of ownership that we have in Western culture. And the real unkind answer to a question is the owner is whoever has the power, whoever came to the place and said, this is mine, and nobody could challenge you because you were the more powerful individual and you made the rules. I don't think that there's, when you think about it, there is no other. In the case of the Negev, it's the state of Israel that is the owner by virtue of establishing itself and being able to defend itself against other claims and so forth. So it's
And tomorrow, if somebody should say this is mine,
that's what will happen. Now, the Bedouins themselves, incidentally, just to make sure that we are not too one-sided here, if you look at the Sinai Peninsula, for example, the whole peninsula, from a viewpoint of international borders, it's an Egyptian territory. So the boss, the owner there is Egypt. If you look at it from the viewpoint of the Bedouin tribes, the whole Sinai is divided into tribal areas. And the tribal areas are zealously guarded. And no one would ever dare in his mind to go and use somebody else's well or a tree or something like that. So,
but then if you think about the French, they said, oh, Napoleon owns it. Oh.
It's one of the absurdities of our life.
The British, oh, the Suez.
Forget the land. Who owns oil? Who owns any resource that we pay for? It's a very important question, and I think it's a question that will have to be wrestled with in that transition to a more sustainable future. At the moment, ownership is arbitrary. It's completely arbitrary, and that arbitrariness allows the concentration of wealth in very small pockets. You can imagine a situation where everybody who is born to the planet has a share, so to speak, in the planet. And the resources are shared by all and are exploited for the benefits of oil, for all, and so on. But that's a completely different system than what we have today. And it's a system that perhaps now, what I said now, for most how shall I say, most people, even in the United States, will smack of socialism or something. And therefore it's the worst enemy that you can think of. I think that we'll eventually have to move in that direction because there's no other way to manage the planet under those kinds of concepts. Now those concepts have to be developed. They're not developed yet at all. They're very primitive. I think that the whole experiments with socialism in the Soviet Union obviously were major disasters. And so on. So there's a great deal of social and economic innovation, not just technology innovation. Social.
How about the innovation of the euro and its demise very soon?
Yeah, you're taking us into directions that and not that I don't know, that I'm not qualified to go, and they're also. Go ahead.
I'm just curious about the word sustainability because it's a word that's been being used for 30 years in terms of economic development in South America and
Everywhere.
Africa. I'm just wondering, in terms of the upfront costs of, you talked about $6 million, is that what the number was? And I'm just wondering, in the longer term, I'm assuming because $6 million is the startup, and theoretically it should then sustain itself. Is that the concept?
Yeah, this is a how should I say it, a venture, philanthropic venture capital that makes possible an economic enterprise. And most people tell me this is a lot of money and you can't justify it, and I'm saying this is nonsense. I mean, you have to invest in communities like this to get them to the point that can be self-sustained in modern terms.
And you see this as a replicable concept, or it as adapted?
I think so. Already now, incidentally, we were approached by the government of Israel to try and see if we could help develop a model Bedouin settlement with housing and everything that will be based on the concept behind Project Wadi Atir. And that will be a major scale-up. At the same time, we're already starting to see if we can work with a large community of Bedouins in Jordan and have a cross-border cooperation with the larger kind of thing. So there are many.
From other countries and continents who are coming to see how this would be modeled?
Yeah, we had a lot of people from Africa, from Peru, from Europe, from many parts.
Could I intervene for a second? If you could, I've been monitoring it. If you could try to summarize what the person is saying, because unfortunately the miking is not picking up well the question.
Okay, I've been trying to do that. Okay,
summarize.
more questions?
Thanks.
Yes.
I had a question about where you're drawing the participants in this cooperative effort. You mentioned that the state of Israel ran numerous government towns and villages where they live. Are the participants in this being drawn from those towns and villages, or are they also being drawn from those Bedouins who are still continuing to live the itinerant nomadic life?
Don't make a mistake about it. There is no, with all the romanticism, there is no nomadic way of life anymore. Like the fellow that I mentioned, he lives in one of those little villages. He just spends time, he is allowed to graze in some areas where he spends most of his time in a tent. And therefore, it's still preserving a lot of the traditional way of life, but there is no group of Bedouins who are roaming with their sheep and goats around the country anymore. There's no such thing. Yes?
You were mentioning the thing about the board, they'll be taking it. Are you familiar with the Amul project in India? That is one of the largest cooperatives probably in the world. So people who own 1 cow, 2 cows, they all go to this place, Amul, and give the milk. And Amul does the marketing all over, including exporting to Singapore.
Let me just repeat it because before it starts, the question.
Well, we are familiar with Amul. It's an organization that helps farmers who have 1 or 2 cows only. A cooperative bring their milk to it, they sell. We'll do something similar here, although not with cows, but with sheep and goats and so on.
Yeah.
Very important concept, because you see, this is how you, the individual small farmers don't have the wherewithals to go to market. And you have to create the mechanisms to make it possible for them.
Right. And the hot water, you said there's a lot of hot water. Would that be eventually used up when you start doing the what you call the soaps and the creams, wouldn't that hot water, once the production begins, wouldn't you be using that?
The question was the use
Hot water. I don't know. I'm really ignorant about how you produce soap, so I don't know if you need hot water. If we need hot water, we'll be able to use it. But we'll try to make as many uses for the hot water as we have hot water. Remember that we'll also produce electricity if we need access heat, so we can heat water for production of soap, something like that. Incidentally, it's an interesting aspect. The electricity that we'll be producing will not be used for the function on the farm itself. They'll be actually fed into the national electric grid, and from which we will draw. But there is still a significant differential in the price that you pay for electricity and the price that you're being paid for if you produce electricity through alternative sources. So basically, one of the products of the farm will be electricity, and it will be a source of revenue. Harold, I think sorry, here's another question.
I'm curious to know how many people you had to persuade to get started on this project.
A lot. Well, look, first I needed to persuade people to support it. And this was very difficult because people who are sympathetic would take me to people who are heading big foundations or organizations, and I realized that those people, that they are totally risk averse. All they could tell me is why this project is impossible and why I shouldn't do it. So this was not helpful. The university, I went to the university. I mentioned that some of the young researchers were very excited about the possibility to participate, but the management of the university, all they wanted to see me disappear because they couldn't figure out. They are used to people who come and say, look, I'm a venture capitalist, I want to buy your patents, I want to invest in what you... They couldn't deal with someone who said, look, I want your talent to join a project. There was no mechanism to deal with this kind of thing. So the university had to be convinced. The land authority had to be convinced to give us the land. The Bedouin community had to be convinced to participate in this. So there were a big circle of groups of people that had to be convinced. But the interesting thing that beyond the kind of the peripheral things, the people that mattered most ended up being convinced. You didn't have to convince them. Like, for example, I mentioned the mayor of the time, Khura, Muhammad al-Nabari. Muhammad is a young mayor of one of these Bedouin towns. He has a PhD in chemistry, which is as rare in the Bedouin community. I think in the whole 200,000 Bedouin community, there are about 40 doctorates, and he is one of them. He used to work for many years in the pharmaceutical industry, so he's an unusual breed. I met him after going there for kind of reconnaissance to see if I could find a Bedouin community to work with, and we hit it right off. He didn't need no conviction. Right away he said, that's what we'll do, boom. We produced this partnership and we started going, and that whole group of people that you saw during that first 6 months, they didn't need to be convinced. They wanted to do something. The only question was what, and how to, through that discussion, to come through that what. So there were kind of circles of people, and at the end, even the government that I wouldn't try to convince because I knew it would be impossible, suddenly when the project reached a certain maturity, they said, my God, this is something we can learn from. I'll give you an example. One of the agencies that are now, ministry that is now involved, the Ministry of Agriculture, which is a very important support for us. The Ministry of Agriculture had tried for years to develop, demonstration stations for the Bedouins. They spent millions of dollars to develop of how to raise animals better, how to deal with diseases, how to get better milks. The Bedouins won't go there because they were too suspicious of government. They want to do anything to do with them. So nothing happened there. Now they realize that they can connect with an authoritative group that knows what it's doing and wants to do it by itself and can use their expertise. And one of our guys, the guy who's the project manager, has gone already through a number of courses of the Ministry of Agriculture. The Ministry of Agriculture is part of this consortium that is put some money into the implementation and so on. So, you know, the idea here, I think, is how to manage, how to orchestrate the convincing process. You don't want to spend your energy convincing those who refuse to be convinced. So you, instead of convincing, you have to try and find those who would want to join with this. And as you, that creates the energy that produces something that others want to join. And that amplifies that energy that more others want to join. And so it grows. It's a fascinating process. Yes, in the back.
Are you using video documenting as well as still?
Yeah, we actually have a very nice short, like 2.5 minutes video that we produced to show, to encapsulate what the project is. And we have it, and if you're interested, I'll give you the link or something.
You have it on YouTube?
And there is actually, arrived today in New York for a few meetings, an important German film producer, a woman who's a very prominent film producer in Germany of feature films, and she's interested in doing a documentary on this as well. We'll see how it works. Sir?
It seems to me that there is also a certain cultural shift, and I wonder whether the basic orientation is towards more strict fanaticism or towards liberalism in terms of religion and...
It's both. What is happening in that community, there's no question that there is a radicalization from the viewpoint of Islam. And that's a sore problem. What is happening, you see, the Bedouins are basically Muslims. But a Bedouin will never go to a mosque. You pray anywhere you were. If you go to some of those towns today, you'll find 30 mosques there. So the Islamic Party have moved in there, and there's a great deal of influence that radicalized. But at the same time, they are not liberal, but how shall I say, more forward-looking elements in that community who are trying to integrate into modern life and are trying to move from a position of supplicant to somebody who takes its future in its own hands, and not hands in an aggressive way, but responsibility and empowerment of that community itself, which is what we're trying to do here.
You look like you have 3 women in that founding group?
No, in the founding group there are 3, yeah.
That's it, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a high percentage, yeah. And there'll be more people, and now this is excluding all the 5 from the cheese that now will be joining, and others. So we'll make sure that women are part of it. Harold, I think we're done. Thank you very much.
Let's give him a round of applause. Okay. Thank you, Michael, very much.
Thank you.
Very much. Pleasure. Okay, thanks. You can measure a little bit and everything like that.